Welcome again. I'm Crystal Cotto Sullivan, your host of Journey to Inner Practical Wisdom. Why practical? I always ask that question because how else do we acquire wisdom but from our practical experiences, our engagement in life, and on all levels, whether it's physical, spiritual, psychic, soulful, or emotional level. Today, Jillian, Joanne, and I will talk about two books. Cassandra Speaks by Elizabeth Lesser, published in 2020 by Harper Wave. You may know her earlier book, Broken Open. The second book is historical fiction, The Fossil Hunter by Shelley Emling, published in 2009 by St. Martin's Griffin, New York. We did not set out to read fiction. However, we do choose our books with a purpose, and you will learn why we chose this book in our conversation. So let's begin our conversation. Oh, Jillian, that sounds great, except we can't hear you.
Okay,
There
hello.
you are.
Yes, we're talking about The Fossil Hunter today, and I was the one who chose that book. And there are a couple of reasons I chose it. First of all, is because I'm really interested in prehistory, dinosaurs, cavemen, how they developed and all that kind of stuff. But this one in particular I like because it was about a young woman who in the 1800s, she would go out and she discovered all these dinosaurs in a place called Lyme Regis in England. And even though she had no education, um, she used to go out with her father onto the beaches of Lyme Regis after there would be a storm and all the landscape would all start to crumble. And she discovered these dinosaurs. And what happened is that some educated men find out what she was doing and what she discovered, and they would come to visit, and she would teach them what she knew, and they actually took her information and they used it and they gave themselves credit and not giving her credit. And I just felt that this is a common story that happens in the world and has happened for a long time, and it still continues to happen where women don't seem to have a voice. But in this story, in this book, we get her voice, and even though it's sad and frustrating to read about, and she did end up dying of breast cancer at 47 years of age. Her story is very uplifting for her perseverance and how hard she worked. And it's interesting to note, too, that she never married because during the 1800s, who would marry a woman who had her own career, her own profession, who wouldn't give up what she was doing because she loved it? But she made quite a number of prominent discoveries that, as I said, men took away from her and made money from, whereas she struggled to make ends meet for her brother and her mother.
So Jillian, one of the other reasons I think you chose the book is because as an author, you're also interested in writing about women who have really kind of been on the periphery of certain stories.
Yes, that's right. And it's funny how that came about because when I wrote my first book, River the Stick Ravers, about a woman in the 60s who lost her husband prematurely, who had to find herself. I mean, women's roles have often been to be in the kitchen, to be second to their husband, and here she is wondering who she is now without him. And sometimes women don't get to ask themselves that question, who am I? What do I want? What are my dreams? You could ask some women who would know the answer to that question. And interestingly enough, Joanne, I was reading your book. Um, what was the name of it again?
Postcards from a rag
From a
picker.
rag picker. And what jumped out at me was the part about resuscitating your dreams. And I was reading that, and there was the feeling that sometimes dreams get buried in other people's needs, and we forget what they are. So I started to thinking about that again. So Anyway, so when I was writing my first book, honestly, I didn't really know what it was about. And I know that sounds strange. Like I knew what the story was, but when I had to think about how I wanted to market that book, I had to find some key components that I could take out into the world. And I realized it was about strong women. That I naturally was writing about that because that was something that was important to me. And my second book is the same way, a woman trying to find herself in the art world of the early 1900s in Toronto. You know that she's not supposed to be doing that, and yet she was. She pushed her boundaries, and that's what I'm really fascinated with. And the hope is in my own stories that women can either find themselves in there and relate to that, or they can be inspired by the story to to reach out and to find themselves. Interestingly enough, I'm reading a book today, and it's a fairly new book. And it's about a woman. It's called The Last Animal, and and it's set in present day, and it's about a woman who she's in a university. She has two daughters, and um, she's working with these paleontologists, and they have this. They're changing the code of this embryo so that she could create a mammoth through an elephant. Anyway, but during her work, men are using her as like as a secretary and to do the dirty work. And yet she just has this deep longing to be somebody. But she's held back by the fact that she has two girls to take care of. Her husband just died a year before. So again, it's another story of a woman in the present day who's still trying to push those boundaries that have been set for so long.
How about you,
And
Joanne? How did you respond to the book?
pardon?
Well, it's interesting listening to Jillian talk about her interest in the dinosaurs and all that. That was never really one of my things. But what I took from the book was I realize now my notes look like a character study. And this is what I wrote down was Mary was a relentless learner.
Mm.
And she picked up this interest, well, I called it an obsession, in fossil hunting from her father, a close connection, right? And the father-mother or father-daughter connection. And her characteristics, as I saw them, was she was absolutely courageous, both physically and against the times that she lived in. And she was daring, definitely non-traditional.
Mm.
And she carved a niche in a highly stratified and sexist society. And she put in so much effort for so little financial reward.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I thought, it's very much like a starving artist.
Mm-hmm.
The number of people that want to be a writer, they want to be an artist, and somebody along the line says, oh, you'll never be able to make a living doing that. Like, why would you want to do that? And then they go into something and they spend 30 years of their life building it, only to come back when they so-called retire to pursue the arts, the things of the heart.
Yeah.
But I wrote, she was willing to pursue her obsession, no matter what the cost. And the other parts that struck me was this, how her work actually shook up the dudes in Christianity.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yes.
well, couldn't have been the creation happened the way we think it happened. And we're not open to any more new information. We just want to believe what we believe, but pretty hard to argue how those things got there. And that it actually threatened their belief system.
Yeah.
Like, wow, like that's huge in a cultural sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at her as, wow, like a very, very interesting woman who was willing to pay the price for her obsession.
Yeah.
no matter what.
Yeah.
And
Well,
she certainly did pay the price, didn't she?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it from that aspect. Yeah.
Mhm.
So thanks for bringing it up. That's great.
I always love dinosaurs. I just think that they're fascinating. So for me, reading about the fossils, because I still look for fossils. I still find fossils. I love finding them at the beach and looking at fossils and whatever. And I was just actually I was in, I think it was either Lake Louise or Lake Moraine. The tour guide had a fossil and she was showing us this amazing fossil that she had found. So I'm fascinated by fossils. Just a really interesting coincidence for me was I happened to also be reading Anne Marie MacDonald's book, Fane, which was set in Scotland and in England. And Mary Annings, the woman in The Fossil Hunter, was mentioned in the book. And I thought, oh my goodness, okay, so she is known some
Mhm.
places. But like you, Joanne, I was quite taken aback by the response of religion and
Yeah.
it was like at one point in the book it talked about the church believed that if these fossils were found, those animals must be hiding somewhere in the world because there's no way they could be from before our timeline. And I was just like, oh my goodness, that's very recent. This
Yes.
very recent. This is like the 1800s. It's not
Yeah.
that long ago. There's the book. Oh, let's put it the right way.
Because that's upside down.
It is upside down.
There you go.
There you go.
The
Perfect.
Fossil Hunter, Shelley Emling. Anyway,
You know, there was a great fear too that these dinosaurs were still around somewhere. So a lot of people were afraid when, you know, this started becoming known that there actually were these creatures in the world at one time.
yeah,
So.
yeah. So the reason we then put Cassandra Speaks with The Fossil Hunter is because Cassandra Speaks is really about women finding their voice.
Mhm.
And I think that we put the two together and yeah, so are you okay if I just read the story of Cassandra? I just think it's so interesting why
Sure.
she chose Cassandra Speaks. So this is Elizabeth Lesser speaking to a professor, and he asked her if she knows about Cassandra, and she said barely. So he said, "Well then, I'll remind you. Cassandra was a princess from the city of Troy. She was the most beautiful of King Priam and Queen Hecuba's daughters. As such, she had many suitors, both mortal and immortal." The professor looked around the empty room and then lowered his voice as if including me in some ancient gossip. Zeus, king of gods, was after Cassandra, and so was his son Apollo. To woo her, Apollo gave her something only a god could give, the coveted gift of seeing into the future. But when he tried to seduce her, Cassandra refused his sexual advances. This enraged Apollo. Instead of just taking the gift of prophecy away, he grabbed her, spat in her mouth, and put a curse on her. "You will remain clairvoyant, Cassandra," he said, "but now no one will listen to you. No one will believe your predictions. So no matter what she foresaw, from the sacking of Troy to the death of her brothers, to the multiple tragedies that would befall her people, no one believed Cassandra. She was eventually driven mad by knowing the truth and being doubted when she spoke it. Her final indignity came at the end of the Trojan War, as her city lay in ruins, just as she had prophesied. She was abducted and raped by a Greek warrior. So the book is really about finding our voice and being heard. It's a great.
It's interesting because a lot of the beliefs that we have about a woman's place in the world come from myths and stories and the Bible. I just wanted to share with you that this is something right out of the Bible from Ecclesiastics. So men are better than women, even wicked men. A woman's sense of shame is deserved. Shame for what? Our out of control emotions and our wanton sexuality that has the power to tempt a man and destroy his virtue. A
Whoa.
woman should be silent with a bound mouth. Men dominate women to protect them from other men. Alliances between women are dangerous. And I wrote down, damn straight they're dangerous because women together are powerful. Right, ladies?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and so we absorb this information and we take it in and we don't question it. I mean, things
Yeah.
in the Bible are gospel, and so and these are the stories we've been told over the years without question. And it's time for us to change the story to really work
Absolutely.
for it.
Absolutely.
And that's something interesting too, because again, as a writer, um, we follow a guideline about the hero's journey, how the hero goes out and slays the dragon and comes back and everybody loves them. But women, the heroine's journey is completely different. The heroine goes out, but she never returns home. She goes out because she's always searching for more. And she will ask for help from her women friends, from where men don't. They have to do it on their own. And then looking for accolades. And I find it really interesting because that was the story I was writing. That was how I was writing my stories. Just because I'm a woman, and my story is naturally different from a man's. So I just find
Mhm.
that really fascinating.
Well, yeah,
Would like to learn more.
because the heroine has to leave in order to get rid of that guy that believes that story, right?
What was that again?
The heroine has to leave because she's with the guy that believes that story about women. It's
Oh,
like,
that's right. That's true. If she wants something, she has to go out and get it herself, right?
Mhm.
that's right. And I think that one of the really great things about this book is that she really debunks the myths and the stories that have been put together in order to support a cultural belief about women.
That's right.
Like the gospel was put together, the gospels were put together centuries after Christ, and they chose certain books that would support the beliefs of the church.
And
Not,
left out what they didn't want.
that's right. So they left
Mhm.
out, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene got left out, the Gospel of Thomas, because they did not agree with the teachings of the church. So,
Mhm.
And it's interesting because, we're talking about vulnerability, and that's something a woman is more likely to do than a man. And it's seen as a weakness, and yet being vulnerable is very difficult.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
or even apologizing,
mhm.
say
Exactly.
I'm sorry. Men find
Well,
that difficult because then they're not strong. It's like I have to be tough. What I say is right, and there's no one should question it. And so yeah, they have a hard time feeling sorry, but a woman will do it sometimes too much.
Mhm.
well, it just makes me go back to the book on loneliness. One of the things she talks about is being able to apologize and
Hmm.
to admit that
Hmm.
we're sorry. And in doing that, it brings us closer. There's more intimacy, vulnerability when that happens. And
Hmm.
yet in our culture, it's look, if a man were to do that, it's like, oh, that's not a manly thing to do. And I think
Hmm.
that, the book is great in terms of really looking at how we've been co-opted into believing certain things about women and certain
Hmm.
things about men. Like I just reviewed the book and I thought she talked about the books that we read in high school.
Hmm.
They're all
Hmm.
by
Yes.
men. They're all by
Hmm.
men.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, I'm hoping that has changed. I believe it has because my granddaughter has showed me some of the things she's reading in high school. But imagine, I mean, when I think about it, I don't think I read any books by women when I was in high school.
Well, I think the thing is, though, like all those classic books, men were the ones doing the writing, except for the few, Bronte and Jane Austen, George Eliot, who was actually a woman. Um, yeah,
Yes.
those men were the ones writing the books. So they're all the so-called classics, and so, I think that's probably why they're coming up. Time to change the story again.
Time to
Let's look
change
through.
the
I'm sure there
story.
are some contemporary classics
And
that we could put out there that
I
are written
thought of
by women.
I thought of something, and I think it's a little bit controversial, but I was thinking of the scandal around Alice Munro and
Oh,
how
yes.
people have been reacting to that. And then I thought, how many men have written books and have been nasty, have been slavers, have been beating women, and yet we still read their books.
Yeah.
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 It just made me think, wow, wow, we have a double standard. Even as women, we have a double standard, I think.
Yeah, and that popped up in our discussion here. I was reading Richard some of those scripture passages the other day as entertainment for his breakfast. The one I said, this is every man's dream. It's the one about the woman with the bound up mouth.
Oh.
And I said, it's not our fault. It just takes us a few more words to explain the same thing.
Yeah.
That, but this thing about the voice of women, I've been watching the, what do we call it, going on in America right now.
Yeah.
And I watched the interview last night with Kamala Harris, and I thought she was trying to explain to the interviewer the process that she uses to solve a problem. And people were wanting these instant answers. What specifically well, see, she wouldn't just go off the cuff. She has a process that she uses to analyze, and then she gets a group of advisors and they get together and they discuss what would be the best possible solution for this problem. And then we'll decide which way we should go. But people were just not satisfied that she wasn't shooting from the hip, making it up as she went along. And I just thought, is she being held to a totally different standard? If that party had picked a male candidate, would they have been scrutinized to that point? And then the other part about words matter.
Yep.
And but also this part about women and their voice. And I've read about on this too, about when women use their little soft voice, no one thinks they're powerful. When we make a statement and we raise our voice at the end of the statement, it becomes a question. It means people get to question what we say. And women could really learn from how to be just matter of fact, state the case. It's not, this is my opinion, I'll stand by it. You can agree or disagree, but this is it. But this, if you watch women talk and you hear them do that little at the end, it just, they may have made a great statement and all of a sudden it became debatable. And I noticed with this particular candidate, sometimes she's in her business mode and very forthright, and other times it's almost a little bit of a whine, and the men just can't handle it, which may explain why at this point more men have gone the other way.
Thanks.
With numerous reasons, I suppose. But again, what it all adds up to is that who tells the story? Who tells the story is telling their version of what they saw, what they experienced. And I thought, wow, that's true. That's very true. The storyteller gets to put the spin or the focus on it. And even if you were to ask any police officer or lawyer who's questioning someone, it can be the same incident and you're going to get 5 different viewpoints because it's from the angle at which they saw it or experienced it.
Yeah.
And so, as women, we really have to think about what is the projection that we want. We have to get real clear about what is our part in this journey. What's our function? What's our message to put out there? And we need to be totally convinced of that. And then other people will buy what we have to say once we're clear about it.
And I think Lesser really talks about how important our personal stories are, and how important it is to appropriate them and own them, and not poo-poo them. It's like our stories are powerful stories.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things. One is she talked about gaslighting and how historically we have been convinced that there's something wrong with us. I really didn't experience that my experience is not real.
Whoa, yeah. That
it's
came
like
through clear, didn't it?
Exactly. So I think that, just realizing that, no, what I'm experiencing is real, and to really own it, and to share it, and to be out there with people. And the other thing about the book that really struck me was when she talked about language and how we use the language of war. So much of our language is in war. The way we do business, the way we deal with kids in school, everything. We talk about, oh, there's a time bomb, or what's happening on the front line. This is going to be a battle. The war against cancer. Now, maybe there's a different way to talk about that. Maybe the working toward a cure for cancer as opposed to a war on cancer, because it's such violent language. And Joanna, even you were talking about shooting from the hip. It's like, but it's so natural for us to use that kind of language. And then even, I was looking at some of the sports idioms that we use, that some of them are pretty violent, like slam dunk, low ball, but like Saved by the Bell, it means that people have been boxing. And then even no holds barred, that means you can do whatever you want in the boxing ring. And we use that. Oh, no holds barred. Like, that's really scary. So the book really made me pay attention to the language that I use. I'm not great at it because I forget, but I think that language really is so important. What we speak is what we believe. And so when we notice what we're speaking, it's like, wait a minute, what do I believe about that? And then it just takes us a step further back in terms of
I think how we speak too, like language obviously is very important, but I was saying in the book about when Let's Speak About Loneliness, about one of the things that the woman was having trouble with is getting people to hear during a meeting. And someone had said to her, like, it's how you're speaking, speaking with confidence, like you said, Crystal. Own what it is that you're saying. Don't apologize for it. And I think we tend to do that sometimes. We're kind of timid about having a voice and sharing it with other people. And so we have to change that and speak with confidence. And Joanne, like you say, we have to be sure we know what message we want to get across. So when we have all these things lined up, then we can put it out there.
Well, great. I hope that we've given our readers some sense of how great these two books were. Both of them are, the Fossil Hunter is just a great story about a woman and about women in general in terms of our voice. And then Cassandra Speaks is just loaded with stories, with myths. She blows through a lot of the myths, talks about her own journey and her own story, which really expands the the meaning of the book, because it's not just theory, it's really her own journey in terms of finding her voice. Because that excerpt that I read, it was her professor speaking to her, and he finally said, you need to find your voice so that you are heard. And I think that if any of you are listening to this, both of those books would be great books to read. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. I hope you have something to take away, even if you don't pick up the book. But stay tuned for our next podcast when we have a conversation about David Kessler's book, Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief. Hope to see you next time or hear you behind the scenes. Bye-bye.